So for like almost the entirety of when I was tattooing, I had to have a second job as well because I was only allowed to charge nothing. I was only allowed to work for tips. So all of the tattoos that I did were free unless you wanted to tip. And so I had to have a second job because I worked 5 days a week at the tattoo shop, which is like how a lot of apprentices start out too, is that you basically tattoo for tips. So I worked 5 days a week at the tattoo shop, and I had to do free tattoos. And then what if the person decided to tip, which usually they'd give me like between $20 and $60 is what I would make. And I didn't get to tattoo very often because our shop didn't get a lot of foot traffic. And then also a lot of times, the guy that I worked with, if someone came in and wanted something, he would just do it. So I didn't get to do a lot. You mean you helped out at the tattoo shop, basically? Because then I had to clean and break down the guy's workstation every time he did a tattoo, and also prep it for when someone came in to get tattooed. And then I had to clean the shop every day. I had to be there when it opened and like be there when it closed. How is that not wage theft? Because you're not technically an employee, I guess. You're an apprentice. And I guess when people start out, they, like, from the most part, I've heard other people say too that they just worked for tips, but not for a long time. Whereas I think only like maybe the last 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, I was actually allowed to choose prices. But I did also then have to pay a percentage of that money to the man that owned the shop. So I got to keep all that I got for a tip, but if I charged a certain amount, I had to give him a certain amount too. So this was one that I did, that someone came in and they had a photo of something similar from Pinterest. And I had to do it on the side of the ribs, which sucks to tattoo there because the skin is like quite thin there, and it's very easy to have blowouts because if you go too deep in thin areas of the skin, then the ink will spread and do a blowout. So this one was pretty fun, and I liked how it came out too. And this one I was allowed to use gray wash for. So you can see there's like the black outline and everything, and the black in the wings, and then there's gray wash to use in the shading. It does also suck to be tattooed there. It's also awkward to tattoo there because typically the person is laying on their side. So you'll usually lay on your side with your arm like this to stretch the skin as much as possible. Because it's really difficult to tattoo skin that's not stretched. So typically this hand is stretching the skin while this hand tattoos. And also the positioning of the body can help stretch the skin too. So this was on the side of the ribs. So also imagine that you're having to draw on the side of a cylinder is also why tattooing ribs fucking sucks. And on top of that, this person sat pretty well as far as I remember, but usually people are in a lot of pain in the rib area too. So then they're also like moving or like flinching or like anything like that. How can we make sure we don't get a tattoo artist like Areola? What are the red flags to look for? I would say just as much as you can look at their portfolios and stuff, or like if they have photos that people have tagged them in and everything like that. And then maybe just go in and talk to them. I feel like not a lot of artists, especially after COVID, do like in-person, what are they called? Like the pre things. But yeah, I would just say look at all their social media, and if they don't have a lot on there, then yeah, the consultations. If they don't have a lot on there, then maybe like look for someone else too, you know, because also if you have like 5 tattoos on there and like a couple of them are good and then the other 3 are maybe like eh. But yeah, so this was one that I did on someone's ribs, which sucked to do, mostly because it was on their ribs and that's not an easy place to tattoo. This one was one that I did quite early on, and I basically got to choose the design. And this one pisses me off because this tattoo, when I did it, my teacher guy was busy. So I was like, okay, I can do kind of whatever I want, because the girl was also really chill and really cool, right? And so for this one, I didn't listen to what he told me to do. And so for the shading, instead of what he told me to do, which he told me to go for shading to like go very, very slow at first and then go faster outwards or whatever, right? And always in circles. This one, I didn't do that. And I was like, okay, I'm doing the circles in the start to get the like solid bits where it's more solid. And then if you pull your needles outwards, it's whip shading, where that's why it has that like, the like kind of like dot or like gradient effect. So that's what I did for this. Which there was another time that I did that while he was watching and he yelled at me and told me that's not how I was supposed to be doing it. And so this tattoo is one of my favorites because I did everything he told me not to do. And afterwards he goes, why don't you tattoo more? Why don't you tattoo like this more often? This is like the best one you've ever done. And then for the rest of my apprenticeship, he was like, you know, my favorite one still that you've ever done is that one 3-eyed cat one. And I was like, are you serious? Bro. So that's why this is one of my favorite ones, and it's because one that I actually just was like, whatever, I'm not gonna fucking listen to what this guy is saying. Thanks, Jackie Jacks. Yeah, which I mean, like, so the way that I met this tattoo artist was he was tattooing the guy that I was dating at the time, and he had great tattoos, and this guy was like a pretty good artist as well, but he's very old school and he's been tattooing since like the 80s. And he had another apprentice who tattooed for a while and did pretty well. And then out of nowhere, she just kind of quit. And then she went on to be a yoga instructor instead. But they were still friends. And so I was like, well, I'm sure that was fine. And then when I was like, I want to apprentice, he was like, I don't really think I'm that great of a teacher, but I'll try my best. And then he was just very mean. And it was horrible. And I hated going in, and it got to the point where I would have so much anxiety, I would just cry a lot, and then I didn't want to go in. He was right, I know. And I'm like, I'm almost mad at myself, because I was like, I should have just listened to him. But at the same time, it's so difficult to get apprenticeships as well, because no one wants to take on an apprentice, because it's time and money. And it's like an investment almost. But this is another one that I did. This was on the front of someone's shin, like near where their ankle is, at the bottom. And that area is really difficult to tattoo because over the bone like that can blow out very easily. And so it's very difficult to, like, when you're doing the lines, not have blowouts and stuff. This one also, I used gray wash in this. And I think this one, I kind of also didn't super listen to what he was saying, but less so than I did for the cat one. So, yeah, this one is one of the ones I had saved. I didn't save a whole lot of them, unfortunately. And then this was one of the last ones I did before I left. And this is on my cousin. And I did 2 of them for her. So, and they're quite large. I did this one on one leg, and then her other leg had a doggy. Did he do any of your tattoos? He did the bee that's on my knee, which I'm getting covered up. And it's not a bad tattoo, but it's like his style of tattooing was quite like almost new school a bit. But yeah, and he also did, I have a bat on the top of my foot that only has line work right now. And I'll get that one colored in eventually. And I think that's all he did. The bee's knees. But yeah, this is one that I did for my cousin. And this was one where he was like, you're only allowed to use black. So I only used black for it, which shading with black is difficult because there's not much gradient. And then the other thing that was difficult about only being allowed to use black is like, there's some, you can see some areas in here where I didn't color all the way outwards, because if you have one area that's already black and then that's the shading and you color up to it with more black shading, then it's indistinguishable from one another. So that was the other difficult thing about it. But yeah, this was like one of the last ones I did. I think there is a bit of gray wash on it, but it's only in the ear puff of the rabbit. But the rest is black. And this is like one of the last ones I did before I had a fucking meltdown and was like, I never want to come here ever again. And so there was like, the way that I quit was just, I quietly like gathered up my things over time, and like my machines were borrowed and a lot of my stuff was borrowed from him, and the only thing that I actually owned was my big like tool chest thing, my big chest of drawers. And so I just kind of like gathered the stuff that was mine, like all of my sketches and my art and stuff. And then one day, and I was like, I had been planning to leave for so long, but I was so afraid to be like, I quit because I fucking hate this, and this has been a horrible experience, especially because since his last apprentice quit, he was like, now that you're my apprentice, don't fucking quit, because the last one did too, and I'll have wasted all my fucking time. And I'm like, oh. So then one day I just was like, I built up my courage to it, and the guy that I was dating at the time, I told him that I was gonna quit because he would drive me to the tattoo shop because I also didn't have a car. So I was working 5 days a week for free, basically. And then I would work the other 2 days at the grocery store, like 10-hour days each. And I didn't have a car, so I would either ride my bicycle the 10 miles back and forth to the tattoo shop, or the guy that I was dating at the time would drive me there. And so it just would be where I was like, I would just cry the whole way to the tattoo shop. And so I just was like, I'm not gonna fucking do this anymore. Like, I can't do it. I hate it here. Like, every day I'm miserable. I'm anxious. Anytime anyone walks through the door, I'm like so anxious what kind of tattoo they're gonna want and if I'm gonna have to be the one to do it and blah, blah, blah. And so one day, just gathered all my stuff, did the day like normal, and then at the end of the day, I was like, I don't know how to say this to you, but I'm not coming back. And it was, I'm really grateful and everything, but I just don't think I'm cut out for this. And at first, I thought it was me, and I was like, man, I just am too fucking anxious, and I think I'm just not good at it, and I'm not learning. And then I was like really upset, and he was very disappointed and like really sad. And he wasn't angry, I think he was more sad. And then I just left and I didn't go back. And then later on, I was like, wait a second, that fucking sucked. And I did not do a bad job at all. It was just a really shitty, horrible environment. So, getting my breakfast burrito and seeing the girl cycling down the street in tears, basically. I know. It was just, like, awful. Would you go back to tattooing if you weren't streaming? I'm not sure, because yeah, there is a lot of like unhappy memories with it, and I think also I just would be like, I'm very like critical and self-critical, and so part of it was not only was he like there was nothing that I could do that he was like, you did a good job on that. I would do a tattoo, and sometimes while I was doing it, he would come over and he would get upset at me, and he'd be like, oh, how many times? There was one time, oh my god, this was like one of the final straws. So I was tattooing his friend, and I was like shading in something that he had done basically. And he came over and he put his hands on his hips and he kind of leaned over. And he was like, you know, I don't know how many times I have to tell you this, like while the guy is there getting tattooed. And he's like, I tell you over and over and over again, it's like you just don't listen. Because I said to him, he came over and I thought I was doing a good job. And I was like, wow, like, I feel really good today. And I said to him, I was like, are you coming over here to say you're proud of me? And he just laughed at me. And he was like, that's what you think I'm going to say? He's like, I don't know how many times I have to tell you because I've told you over and over and over again. He's like, but that's not how you do it, and you're just doing it wrong, and you just keep doing it the wrong way over and over and over again. And I was like, I'm gonna go drown myself somewhere. It was so fucking awful and so embarrassing. And there was like another time where I was tattooing my friend, and I did this really cool like woman's like claw hand with a dagger in it on the back of my friend's arm. And he came over and he just was like, I would be like, oh, the other thing is I would be like, oh, how's this look? Like, how's it going out? He'd be like, well, I guess it's okay. And he'd be like trying to make a joke, I think. And I'm like, do you have anything like nice about it? And he'd just be like, no. And then he'd eat a banana and walk away. Did the friend like it at least? That guy was so chill, he didn't give a fuck about nothing. So, and then my friend that I was tattooing when he came over and said that was just like, I think he was a bit put off by that, you know. Did you figure out what his problem was? I think, well, he was going through a lot of stuff in his personal life as well, so I think I just was kind of like his punching bag, I guess. But I don't know, it was so awful, and I've forgotten a lot of it because probably also I was fucking traumatized by it, trying to learn. And like, there was like good times too, where like we would be sitting drawing all day, or like, you know, we'd go out to get lunch from the shop down the street and come back, and like, he was nice sometimes, but like, especially in a professional setting where I was trying to learn from him, it was just awful. What is this, Loboto? Crust no one. I fucking love that. That's actually a great design, Loboto. See you, Mido Choco! But yeah. The more that I remember about that, the more I'm like, oh yeah, that fucking sucked, and it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. Because he'd tell me how to do something, he'd be like, here's how you do it. Here's how you... Especially with shading, he'd tell me over and over again, shading. And then I would watch him shade or color something in. And it's like, if I bring up paint, I'm just like, what's it called? I'm just like venting at this point. But let me see. I'll play Fallout in a second. So with shading, he was like, you need to go in a circle and then bring it out like super, super fast. Right? Or with coloring in, he'd be like, you need to do tight circles and then they overlap so that you color it in. But then when I would watch him color, he'd like color in like super, super fast and then go over it more than once. And that's like what a lot of artists do as well too. Because you can do tight circles and like color it in, but they also like go over it a bit here and there. And not like excessively or anything. And then same thing with shading. And I'd watch him do these things where he's like, don't pull the shading outwards like this. You're supposed to go in circles and then faster. And I'd be like, he'd be like, come watch me do this tattoo. And so I'd sit and I'd watch him for like hours. And he'd be doing all the stuff that he would tell me not to do. Ah! Ugh. Anyways, I'll show you something that I've been drawing. LOL. So having this big, nice drawing pad over here, I've been working on this, and it's been really nice because it's Clip Studio. That's not vagina, that's underwear. So in Clip Studio, you can also like 3D model stuff to see where shading is and everything. So this is what I've been working on. So this is my thing. And I was doing that yesterday and then some of today too. I feel bad for you for the whole apprenticeship thing. The whole thing sounds so messed up and horrible. The guy sounds like an ass. It's a shame being like that causes the tattooing to stop, because that's what you've shown is actually pretty good, especially the cat. Thank you. Yeah, I think, like, when I went and got the Peepo Courage and when I got the Snoopy, I was talking to that tattooist about it too, who is also a femme-presenting person. I think they just identify as a woman. And I told her what happened, and she's like, yeah, that's basically exactly what happened to me too. And, like, a lot of women that I've talked to that are tattoo artists that have done apprenticeships, especially under men, like, it's just a very toxic masculinity sort of thing with tattoo apprenticeships and being, like, taught by men, unfortunately.